Have you ever noticed that after a stressful day, even the smallest thing that your partner does can set you off? I've had women tell me, he breathed too loud and I went off on him. I know that that sounds funny, but it's not just a bad mood, it's your physiology affecting your relationship. Today, I'm going to break down how stress hormones, especially cortisol, affect your ability to decompress and calm, how stress hormones block your ability to connect, and how they even rewire your brain. And once you see the science, you won't be able to look at stress the same way again. In today's episode, we'll talk about how cortisol flips the switch in your brain from connection to survival, how chronic stress suppresses your calming hormones, and how oxytocin, which is your love and bonding hormone, is affected in all of this. And finally, I'm going to go through evidence based tools to help you protect your health and your relationship. Hi, I'm Victoria. If you're new here, I am a Yale trained women's health provider and science nerd looking to make relationships and health simple. I'm so glad you're here. So imagine this, you walk through the door, it's been a super stressful day, and you are just at your end. The kids maybe were screaming in the car, and you walk in, and your partner looks at you and says, "Hey, what's for dinner?" In that moment, you have two options: to respond kindly or not. Let's say you don't respond kindly. That moment is your nervous system being on overdrive. It's not able to process, it's not able to connect, it's actually doing something completely different. Our physiology is on edge. Our brain is functioning differently. Instead of using our logical thinking, our prefrontal cortex, in that moment, the amygdala, the emotional responsive part of the brain, snaps back. And that's not you being a bad partner. It's you really feeling and being led by your physiology. Okay. So the way that I think about it is, in a stressful situation or after a long day of stress, your body kind of pulls the fire alarm. And so instead of standing there, there's a fire and there's a fire alarm being pulled. Instead of standing there and saying, okay, so what should I do now? Chaos happens, right? Nobody stands around. Everybody's trying to get out. Everybody, right? There's panic. And that's exactly how I think of your brain in that moment. That amygdala is panicking and it's just like all over the place. So many thoughts, so many emotions, and everything is at the tip of your tongue. You just want to, some people say, they feel like they want to explode. So what is happening? Your physiology has shifted. You are not in a moment of connection or wanting to connect. You are in a moment of survival, fight or flight, right? That fire alarm's been pulled, and that's how your body feels. Is this really true? Is our amygdala really acting like that? Well, I bet you're going to say it is true if you've ever had a stressful day and then you, after a stressful day, had to deal with life and people. If you've ever had to do that, I'm sure you felt where you are on edge and you're like, the people around me are not doing anything to me and I'm on edge, right? So it's not the situation at hand, but it's the chronic stress that happened before that's putting you on edge. And so what's actually happening? So I'm going to get into the science. I think understanding the science really helps us see how all of these things are connected, because not only is it stress and cortisol, it affects your ability to be intimate, your desire, I should say, to be intimate, your connection with your partner. So many things are affected by stress. And so let's talk about that. Your hypothalamus, which is the master control center in your brain, um, releases hormones that tell the other parts of your body what to do. So it releases a hormone that it is called corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH. And this tells your pituitary gland, another part of your brain or in the back of your brain, to release what's called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. So ACTH, then goes, so two steps happen in your brain, and then it goes to your adrenal glands and tells your adrenal glands what to do in a time of stress. So your adrenal glands live on top of your kidneys, and that's where cortisol is made. Adrenaline is made there too. And so this is good and normal, right? When we are stressed, we want our brain to recognize, hey, there's a stressor. I have to run away. This is dangerous. There's a fire. Cortisol is made and it makes us act. So this is good and normal. And we need that cortisol to increase glucose availability for us, to make us think clearer, to set off chain reactions that help us deal with a stressor. But what happens when we're chronically stressed? When we're chronically stressed, that cortisol is chronically high, and instead of just a one and done. And that's when dysfunction happens. So dysfunction doesn't happen when you have one stressful event and your body responds, right? Like that's what we need and want. It's when the cortisol is chronically high when dysfunction starts to happen. So when your cortisol is chronically high, it starts to suppress your reproductive function. Okay, as one of the things. We'll cover other things. That's the axis that affects your sex hormones. Okay, so how does that happen? So in the hypothalamus, again, back in the brain, it releases corticotropin releasing hormone, and then cortisol when your stress is high, chronically high, cortisol is released from the adrenals. So the thing that is telling your adrenals to make cortisol and the thing that the adrenals make, those two things go back to the brain and inhibit what's called gonadotropin releasing hormone to be released from the hypothalamus. So they go back to the hypothalamus and tell the hypothalamus, hey, this person is too stressed to be making sex hormones, to be making a baby, to be ovulating. Shut that down. Okay. So the gonadotropin releasing hormone is the thing that stimulates LH and FSH from the pituitary to then tell your body to ovulate. Okay. So when these hormones are disrupted, ovulation is disrupted, and ovulation is key for progesterone to be made. When you ovulate, the thing that is left over after ovulation, the corpus luteum, makes progesterone, and progesterone is a calming hormone. So what can happen in times of stress? Your period can shift, your luteal phase, so the last half of your cycle, can be shortened because progesterone is not being made as much, or you didn't ovulate to begin with. And so if ovulation doesn't happen, your progesterone levels drop, and lower progesterone means more symptoms of PMS, more mood swings, shorter cycles where you don't ovulate, and sometimes it can even affect your sleep. Okay. So there's a part that's also happening in the brain. So progesterone churns into a metabolite called allopregnanolone. So allopregnanolone is important because in the brain, it's a natural calming chemical. So allopregnanolone binds to the same GABA receptors that anti-anxiety medications bind to or use. And so when progesterone is lower, you make less allopregnanolone, which means that you have more irritability, more anxiety, and less ability to emotionally regulate yourself and how you feel. Okay. And unfortunately, stress doesn't just stop there. It also blunts your oxytocin. You don't respond as well to the oxytocin hormone. Oxytocin is what makes you feel safe or loved after a hug or after intimacy. It's what makes you feel like you will forgive when your partner asks for forgiveness. Under stress, couples release less oxytocin and they communicate less effectively. And so under stress, that cortisol hits much harder because oxytocin is not there to kind of buffer or blunt the response. So let's review. Chronic stress shifts your body from a chemistry of connection to a chemistry of survival. So it shifts your body from making oxytocin and progesterone to making cortisol and everything that cortisol affects. And that shift is not just in your body, it's also in your emotions and it's also in your relationship. So, what does it all actually feel like in daily life? When cortisol runs the show, when cortisol is high, it makes your progesterone lower. And so what that happens is you feel like your patience is not there right? Things that used to kind of like just rolled off your back now irritate you. Okay. And it's harder for you to cope with them. So that's not because you suddenly stopped loving your family. It's because the cortisol is taking away the buffer, taking away the calming hormone. So not only is it making you feel more stressed, it's also taking away the calming hormones. The other consequence of chronic stress is that it can affect sleep. And sleep then again affects cortisol because it makes your cortisol higher, which decreases your progesterone. It's a vicious cycle. So after a bad night's sleep, you might be more irritable, more tired. You might have less patience the next day. And your partner, you might not feel like connecting with your partner or being intimate with your partner. And it's not because you don't love your partner, it's because your body is prioritizing survival versus connection. Okay. It has nothing to do with you not caring about your partner. So the intimacy piece, when you have lower progesterone and less oxytocin, that things like hugs or intimacy don't trigger the same response. Cortisol blunts that response when you're stressed. And so it's like you don't feel like reciprocating or you don't feel like responding. That intimacy is not as pronounced. That hug doesn't do as much as when you're not stressed. Okay. So there's a hopeful side. Just because these things exist and physiology exists doesn't mean that we can't affect it. Knowing it is the key, right? So just as much as stress hormones can put stress on your relationship, we can counteract them to decrease that stress. Studies show that when couples work through a conflict and use humor or affection or are willing to understand or support the other person, let's say your partner is going through conflict at work and you're supportive, those couples have lower cortisol levels. So while going through conflict, humor or affection or support decreases cortisol in those couples, and studies show that their immune systems are healthier. When partners share positive emotions, so they laugh together, they joke together, it shows that the other person's stress hormones don't peak as high, which is always great. Let's talk about some other things that you can do, some solutions to reset your physiology and to help your body cope with stress, because we all know that we can't live in a world where there is no stress. I mean, I guess you could live in a bubble and lock yourself in a room, but even that can be stressful. So really, we live in a world that's full of stressful events, stressful moments. And so how do we buffer that so that we don't allow stress to affect our relationships, the relationships that are really important to us, those with our significant other, our kids? So I'm going to give you 4 tools that you can use today to help your body reset and help your body buffer that stress, boost the progesterone, and then boost the oxytocin. So some easy things. One easy thing is using or having a micro reset. A 20-second hug has been shown to lower cortisol and boost oxytocin. So that's not just like you and me being cute. It's actually shown by science that it will boost oxytocin and lower cortisol, 20 to 60 seconds. Another tool is slow breathing. So we have this nerve, it's called the vagus nerve, and it's a huge nerve that runs all through our body. It's a cranial nerve coming from our brain all the way through our body that regulates a lot of things like, your digestion, your heart rate. And so what this vagus nerve does is it puts our body into rest and digest instead of fight or flight. So it shifts our physiology from survival to connection, to relaxation. And so an easy way to activate this nerve is by taking a deep breath in to the count of 4 and then breathing out for the count of 6. So, and then for the count of 6, you breathe out. So doing that for 5 minutes stimulates your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve responds by lowering stress and boosting heart rate variability. So that's really important. If you want something even quicker, if you're like, I don't have 5 minutes, if you want something even quicker, a sigh is another thing that you can do. So how do you do a sigh? You fill your lungs big. And then once you feel like you filled your lungs big, you take a little bit more air in and then you blow it out. What I wanted to ask is, have you ever noticed that when you're having a stressful day or you're doing something stressful, you naturally kind of sigh? Now you're going to pay attention to see if you do a sigh or not, but it's something that we do. So one deep inhale in, quick, like a little bit more air in, and then a long exhale. And just doing that for a couple times will also um, you know get you out of that fight or flight, and sometimes even faster than mindfulness or meditation. What else can you do? You can support your calm hormone. So that's your progesterone. So let's talk about how to support that. We already mentioned this, but sleep, right? Protecting your sleep is the most powerful thing you can do for your progesterone. So working on going to sleep, we have a whole episode on sleep. Poor sleep keeps your cortisol high and then therefore affects your reproductive function, right? That high cortisol then affects how much progesterone you make, if you ovulate, things like that. Nutrition matters too. So you need magnesium, you need vitamin B6 to support the making of progesterone. And so eating magnesium rich foods like leafy greens or dark chocolate, high foods that are high in vitamin B6 really supports making progesterone. And, these are not cures. These are ways to support your body to make the hormones that your body needs, right? To give your body the raw materials to do what your body needs to do. What else can you do? You can schedule times of connection. Our bodies and our physiology likes predictability. It doesn't like chaos. Build moments of connection with your partner. So maybe it's a dinner without technology, or maybe it's a full day without technology. Maybe it's a walk after dinner or a 5-minute check-in before bed to see how your partner is feeling. These simple moments reduce cortisol and strengthen your relationship and your emotional safety net, so to speak. What else can you do? Another thing that you can do is practice mindfulness. So, mindfulness is when you pay attention to the thing that you're doing, is the easiest way to describe and easiest way to start doing it. So, if you're on a walk, you're paying attention to the air, to your body, to the sunlight, to the things around you, right? Being aware of your body. So, that's one example. Taking small pauses. So, this is, 10 to 15 minutes where you take a small pause to just pay attention to how your body's feeling, where you're holding tension. So, stress doesn't just affect our health, it affects our patience, our emotions, our ability to connect. And once we understand the physiology, we can start to shift the physiology from a physiology of stress to a physiology of connection. Try a hug. Try a walk where you are paying attention to everything that is around you, or just paying attention to how your body feels. You will notice a difference and you will notice your physiology shift, and so will your partner. If you found this episode helpful, I think you're really going to like the episode about how physical touch rewires your nervous system and exactly what you need. I will link it up here. See you in the next one.